You're listening to SuperPower Mommas on the SuperPower Up podcast, the show that embraces the art of soulful parenting.
Hello and welcome everyone to SuperPower Mommas. I'm so excited you're here. I am your host, Laura Greco. And today's topic is self-improvement habits that create harmony and peace. And I am so excited because I have Lauren Cardinale here with me, and we are going to be discussing this topic again of habits that really create harmony and peace. Lauren has started out in her world in the corporate field. But when we melt down everything she's done in that way, what has really stands out to me is that she ultimately functioned as a mentor, a communicator, a liaison, and confident, more or less a coach throughout her time. She is also specializing in hypnotherapy, which is a beautiful way of assisting people in their healing process, especially with pain management. But what I learned about Lauren also is that she has spent a lot of time educating people around positive communication and also around how we think and how what we think really matters in our life and what manifests in our life. And then lastly, she discusses often about the lost art of listening. And isn't that true? Often I say that children, what they need most from their parents is to be seen and to be heard and to know that they're valued and loved. And yet, isn't that what we all really want from others too? And really turning that attention to us and how we listen to ourselves. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lauren. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Laura.
I'm so glad that we are having this opportunity to bring you to the audience. And so I want to thank the audience also. So when we're thinking, of course, we're thinking about the topic of self-improvement, habits that create harmony and peace. And in your journey, you have done quite a number of things. However, what I'd like to ask you now is our traditional question, which is, what is your mama superpower, Lauren?
Well, Laura, I've given that thought to that superpower. That's a big question. You know, superpower, that's a mighty big claim. And given what you said in the intro, all the things that you were covering, I was like, oh my gosh, let's just start talking, because I'm sure there's just so much to talk about. But the superpower that I feel I bring to my children and to my family, to the kids that I work with, and what I try and bring when I do speaking engagements to high schools and schools, is that idea of, probably best to say it as resiliency, the perspective, the coping mechanisms, the way we understand ourselves, and that we can only control ourselves, and how we do that, we have more power than we even realize until we start to work with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so resilience and the ability to tap in. So your superpower, and you have a family you have 2 children, right?
I do. I have 2 boys. Two boys.
Right. So I wanted to just bring that out for the audience. So resilience really is your superpower, is what you're telling me, right?
Well, let me say, I hope that's my superpower. That's really where I spend my focus. And that's what I try and teach and exemplify and be a role model for. So that's my aim.
Yeah. I love that. I love that word, because really there is nothing perfect in life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the resilience, at least from what I can see, is perfect for what you not only live yourself but teach to others, because this gives them an opportunity to take whatever is going on and create an experience of happiness and joy and peace, mm-hmm. right? And harmony, mm-hmm. which is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
When did you notice that you have this superpower?
Good question. I think it was, I kind of think that my whole journey in life was really to prepare me for being a mom, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. That being a mother, as my kids started to grow, you see and experience and witness the feelings that they're having. And of course, they make sense. Of course, the feelings that they're having are making sense. And from the adult perspective, crying over a toy or something like that, it makes perfect sense, but helping them move through that. So it started out when my kids were very young, and not from the perspective of it's okay or necessarily even the distraction and moving on to something happy, because that's not realistic in our adult lives either. It's working through it, which is where the resiliency and the coping mechanisms come from, right?
Yes, right. And so really it's through as you're saying, your experience with your children and utilizing basically your superpowers, which I'm sure you have more than one, is a way to really realize the person that you are. Is that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And honoring the feelings that we have, because, and I can't even tell you how many times I've said this to my kids, to my clients, both children and adults, that your feelings are valid simply because you're having them. They don't need to be justified by anybody else. If you're feeling it, it is valid. That's it. That's all we need to know. And then what does it mean, and how do we move through that?
Right. And I love that, first of all, acknowledging our feelings is vital, right? Because you do teach a lot about how we think really affects our health as well as our, relationships, correct?
Absolutely. I could go on for hours about that, but I won't. But absolutely.
Yeah. So the point that you're making here really is to just recognize them and be with those feelings instead of allowing them to recede or stuff them down and have them reside somewhere in our bodies.
Right. And one of the first questions that I ask people for any feeling that they're having is, where do you feel that in your body?
Yeah.
Okay, you're feeling anger. Where are you feeling it in your body? Okay, notice that. Pay attention to it. And one particularly beneficial, which depending on the age might be more appropriate than at times than others, but a question to ask yourself or to encourage others to ask the kids, to ask ourselves, isn't it interesting that I'm feeling that? What is that about? I'm feeling angry and I feel it in my stomach. Oh, isn't that interesting? What am I angry about? So we start to get that perspective and some objectivity about it, which is so important because that's where the learning is. And then
Correct.
We can change it.
Oh, yes, correct. Oh, and I love that. I love that you, the questions. Busy lives of moms today create a stir that they're not able to slow down or at least feel like they can't slow down, to take the time to be with the feeling that they're having and then have an opportunity to look at it in a new way. So, but acknowledging it is very, very important. And then moving on to, at least that's what I teach. Okay, so we have this feeling and we feel this way. Now let's have a look at where this is going and what changes can we make, right?
Yeah. And, the thought and the questioning only takes a moment, but that doesn't mean the answer has to come in a moment. It can be a day or two before we realize and understand let's go with the same example, what the anger is about. And that's fine. When there's time, it'll bubble up, it can percolate and the answers will come. It's because there's no timing on the answers, right? The learning, it's allowing the learning to take place.
Yeah. I know for me, writing helps me when I can't seem to sort it out. I have to come up and into my office here and just start writing away and see what comes. And I don't even know what to write half the time. I'm just writing because, okay, I'm writing because I'm angry.
Yeah. And you know what, Laura, I have to say that's something, and I know a lot of people benefit from writing and journaling and getting thoughts out that way. But if I put myself into that same mode as many mothers where, the time factor and analyzing the emotions, I thought, oh my gosh, to sit down and just start journaling or writing for 10 minutes, I don't have time for that. I have to do the laundry, I have to do this, I have to do that. And it didn't happen for the longest time until it was last year. I sat down and actually did it one time. And I set the timer for 10 minutes. And in 5 minutes, I had the answer that I needed. I was like, this is fantastic.
I know. And it is hard. And we do find ourselves then dwelling on it while we're doing the laundry and while we're doing everything else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that can be hard for us to find peace and harmony when we're, not sorting this out. So
yeah.
We brought this out. We have to take a quick break, Lauren. But this is a very exciting conversation. So I'd like to invite everyone to stay with us. You're listening to SuperPower Mommas. But before we go, Lauren, can you please let people know how they can find you?
Oh, sure. You can find me on my website, which is www.laurencardinale.com. And Cardinal is spelled like the bird, but with an E on the end, laurencardinale.com. That's the easiest way. My phone number is there, but I'll leave it anyway, 973-418-2170. Those are the best ways.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lauren. So you've been listening to Self-Improvement Habits that Create Harmony and Peace, something we all want. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
Are you here to change the world? Do you talk about things like vibration, frequency, awakening, and consciousness? Are you pretty sure you have superpowers? The SuperPower Net is unlike normal coaching programs and conscious communities. We provide training, intuitive guidance, peer-to-peer learning, intensive one-on-one coaching, and a high vibrational network of people just like you. When you join the net, you get 24/7 access to a collaborative group of people who support you as you master your personal power and unlock your superpowers. If you're ready to use your superpowers to change the world, then join the SuperPower Net today. Visit superpowerexperts.com/thenet to learn more.
Hello, you're listening to SuperPower Mommas, and we're just back from our break with Lauren Cardinale. And we're talking on the topic of self-improvement, habits that create harmony and peace. I'm so excited to continue our conversation, Lauren. Before we went on a break, we were talking about the busyness of moms and really taking that time to explore, the feelings that they're having, and then creating new solutions, and how that's such a challenge for moms. Do you have any suggestions that you think could help them to be motivated to take that? I mean, your example was beautiful, but yeah.
Well, Laura, there are a couple of things that come to mind, and in thinking of, particularly of busy moms, time is the key, right? Keeping things as efficient as possible and getting to the heart of the matter as quickly as possible so that we can make the changes to live in more peace. One of the things that we hear often is, just take a breath, just breathe, and that's absolutely true, but I just wanted to take it a little bit further in an explanation, and then offer a suggestion of how we can incorporate it so easily. Is with the breath, it's the belly expanding breath, because that's where the oxygen is. We're moms. We've watched our babies grow, and we know that when the babies are young, when they breathe with their whole belly. Yeah. And in our society, in the stand up tall, suck it in kind of thing, we end up chest breathing. And that's not where the power is. That's not where the peace is. The power and the peace is in that belly expanding breath to get the oxygen to the brain. Why is that important? So we can think better rather than operating in our stress mode. So taking that breath, well, when do we do that? How do we get into that habit? I usually say if there's something that you have a pattern of doing throughout the day. If you drink a lot, maybe it's every time you take a drink. If you drink a lot, maybe it's every time you need to visit the facilities. If you're on the phone a lot, maybe every time you hang up the phone, or if you're traveling, every time you're at a stoplight. Those are your signals to take the breath. And take a deep breath, 1, 2, 3 breath, and a nice super long exhale. The key is in the exhale. And what I have found in 2 or 3 days of doing just that practice, we find that we take the breath when we need it, and the release is on that exhale. It happens naturally, automatically, because our bodies know what to do to help to release that. And that allows us to think more clearly, to be more centered. If we have time to meditate, great. 5, 10, 15 minutes, fantastic. If you don't, just using the breath in that way can make such a big difference in the clarity, the mental clarity that we can have to approach every problem.
Beautiful. I love that. And I love that you broke it down with into a habit that we already have and incorporating it into that same habit. Love that.
Reasonable, right?
It makes it easier to remember.
Yeah, that's right. And as always, it's paying attention to where we're feeling things in our bodies, asking that question, because that we can do anywhere, anytime, right?
Yes.
Gosh,
yes.
I'm feeling sad. Where am I feeling that in my body? What does it mean? And just it's a moment. That internal dialogue is a fraction of a moment, but the learning can be exponential.
So our bodies is a barometer, basically, for how we're feeling. It's a way for us to ground ourselves and connect, correct?
Absolutely, because our bodies, I work in hypnotherapy at the subconscious level, and what our bodies are feeling, it happens at a subconscious level, so our bodies feel it before our minds even know it. So there's tremendous information that we can get from the body's responses.
Love that. It's kind of like this. Did you ever notice when there's a storm coming and we don't even know the storm's coming yet and the animals start acting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Our bodies have that same capacity, but it's a matter of that conscious connection. So I love that the breath that becomes that habit. I also think of the breath in the idea of a stressful situation and how you had mentioned that it helps us to get back grounded. And I was thinking, and you said something about reaction, and I love that because when I think of it as connecting our heart and our head together. Like when we're in reaction, we're just not thinking, we're just reacting something.
That's right.
When we're connecting our heart again, now we're in the more responsible response.
Right.
Of our
life. Yeah.
Which is where we want to be often if we want peace and harmony, right? So
absolutely.
It's a habit. Love that you brought this out. You're a mom and you've built a career and all of this, and I'd like to tap into that a little bit more. How important do you find that a mom having, maintaining some of her autonomy really impacts her family, her children, and so forth, and her peace?
Well, it's really an essential component, because if we're honoring ourselves, then that's the role modeling for everyone in our family to honor themselves. And it's not necessarily that part of honoring ourselves by not working or working 100 hours a week, or whatever honoring means to the individual is the example. It's the role modeling. And that's what I think is most important.
Yes, and I love that. I was just, when you were talking, a flash just came to me. I have a grandmother that I never met. She passed when I was 12, my mother was 12. However, I learned about her from my mom and found out that although she was, of course, a mom at home, like running a house, that was her job, to be mom. Mm-hmm. She had an artistic flair, and she used to color photos with watercolors. And she felt, so when we think about what that means, maybe it means a career, maybe it means something else. And maybe it means, the delving into raising children, but generally a mom has some interest that's purely hers, and finding that and maintaining that is powerful, I think. And I was thinking about her and how you mentioned that it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be anything.
Sure. Yeah, my mom was an athlete growing up, and her job when she and my father got married, and she was at home with the kids. She was at home with us, and to honor that athlete part of her, I remember Monday nights she had her volleyball league, and she had a bowling league, and she played softball. And at those times when none of those things were happening, she would grab a shovel and go outside and garden just to dig and get some of that physical activity. Just honoring herself for that important part of her.
Right, right. So I guess what I'm driving at here is that often today moms feel like they have such a, and I think we've all experienced it in some form. There's some expectation around being a mom and being that perfect mom for our children. However, that's individual for one thing, and not to be judged by outsiders. And it's different for us all. We're all so unique.
Absolutely. And there was a quote, I think it was an Albert Einstein quote, that something to the effect of everyone suffers by comparison, that looking on the social media or comparing yourselves to others, you're always going to look for the part that's better. And the end result is feeling like we're less. And it's just a matter of taking that into consideration to just be who you're going to be. And it's a process. And I get it. I've been there. I've done it. And I still do it. I still do it. Just to be who you're going to be. And as long as your heart is in the right place, the love is there. It's all good. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good.
Yeah, it is all good. And in doing this, you've spent quite a bit of time about how we think and positive communication, basically, with parents and children and adults to adults. In your experience with all of this, how does that really help with the peace and harmony in a home when a mom is truly happy in her own heart?
Great question. I think there's truth to the statement, which it's cliche, but I would say that it's cliche, and I will tell you that I resisted the thought that the mom is the hub and happy wife, happy life, that whole thing.
That's my whole thing.
I've resisted it and thought, well, why can't I just be in a bad mood when I want to be in a bad mood and all of that? But I realized that when I am good, not only am I the best representation of myself for my kids, and what's the saying? I think it's also another Albert Einstein quote, role modeling may not only be the best way to teach, it's the only way to teach.
Sure.
That by being the best version of ourselves, that's what we're bringing to the world. And we're shining our best light, and that allows others to step up too. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's our duties as moms to just keep it going and not be the best version of ourselves all the time, because that's an impossible feat. It's the progress, the understanding, if it's 2 steps back, then work your way to taking 2 steps forward again, and being right with ourselves. So that's the representation, and that's what allows others' lights to shine brighter as well. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Because it just, a lot of things came up for me. But when we think about that idea of being able to see ourselves as a full human being with all that comes with that, and we're still whole and complete in who we are, and every experience is either a joyful, happy, harmonious experience, or it's a teaching experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the teaching experience is what helps us grow. And so maybe we could think differently about what we feel, when we're in a bad mood, we're in a bad mood, but what's the source and how can we grow through that so that we are more equipped for the next time,
Right. That's right. I was just working on my newsletter today, and it is about gratitude and that idea of the learning that we don't have to be that perfect picture, but smile stuck on our face isn't eternally happy or optimistic, because it's unrealistic. That I can be just as grateful for my anger, for my fear, for my sadness, because of the learning that it gives me and the way that learning from it helps me move more peacefully through life.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. Lauren, in your work, you're working with people mainly through pain management. Is that correct?
It's accelerated healing and pain management. So
Okay.
yeah, and it's everything in between. It's the classic hypnosis for fears, phobias, habit change, behavior change, but the specific additional training that I have is for accelerated healing, whether it's cancer patients or working with people for the fears around surgery, so that it's a more peaceful experience, which always leads to better and faster healing. And certainly pain management, because we have that capacity to regulate our pain to a certain extent, but certainly more beneficial than always having to use medication.
Right. And so when we're talking about, the habits that you create harmony and peace, those self-improvement habits, and we look at what your work is all about, I'm drawing the connection of the more we acknowledge and stay honest with ourselves and how we're feeling and moving through those in a way that's positively solution oriented. Do you see the connection I'm drawing here between that and the work you do for people who have not either known about it or not experienced that maybe in their early child life, that they have an opportunity now to move into a new space of healing?
Absolutely, because the healing it doesn't always have to be physical healing. It's emotional healing as well.
Yeah. So great habits help us to, as you get older, you don't want to have these, and I think there's a lot more healing that has taken place over the years, more awareness from when, older generations and what they knew. Yeah. So in your work and in your life course, I'm sure that you imagine something really grand that you're a piece of, going forward. And what would that be? What is it that you feel in your life that you're doing with your superpower will ultimately result in someday?
Well, that's a great question. And I have, I'm not going to say trepidation. My goal has always been in my work, the idea is to work with individuals to the extent so that essentially I'm no longer needed. Right?
Isn't that
So that we all have the tools that we need to heal our emotional, spiritual, mental, physical bodies, and it's kind of the clapping of the hands. Okay, my work here is done.
Yeah.
Kind of approach.
Move on to other things.
Yeah. That's my goal, and whether it will be accomplished, well, time will tell. Now, won't it?
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be challenges, but it's beautiful when the tools are readily not only known about but available, and able to be accessed by us, right?
And yeah, that's really the key. It's knowing what tools are available and being able to access them, whether it's hypnotherapy or something else. But tapping into ourselves, acknowledging ourselves, being aware, avoiding the perfectionist tendencies, because when we're perfectionists, then we're seeking the outside approval, and we seek that so much that we lose sight of who we are, what we like, who we want to be, and what resonates with us. So paying attention and being aware of ourselves.
Beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Thank you, Lauren, so much. We're coming to the close of our discussion. We could go on, I think, for a long time.
Wow, that was so fast.
I know, but out of all of this, Lauren, is there one thing you'd like for moms to take to heart today from our discussion?
I think that it's to take to heart is that we're all doing the best that we can in any given moment. And that's a great place to be. And if we need more help, more assistance, it's there. And it's paying attention to what we're feeling inside. And once we do that, then we can better identify where we need to go.
Oh, I love it. Lauren, where can people find you again? Could you just mention that?
Sure. My website is www.laurencardinale, and Cardinal is like the bird, but with an E on the end, laurencardinale.com. My direct line is 973-418-2170, and that's me. That's a direct line to me.
Yay. That's fun, right? Direct line to someone.
No recordings.
That's great. Well, I just want to address all you super mamas that are out there. Thank you so much for listening, for being with us today as Lauren and I have discussed this self-improvement habits that create harmony and peace. And I just want to remind you to love yourself for the treasure that you are. You are courageous and strong, and you do have what it takes. Changing the world starts in our own hearts and in our own families, in our own homes. So own your superpowers and go out and be you. Thank you for listening.
Love it.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower Quiz today.